was going to go straight into my speech, but I can't quite do that. So I'm going to start in a second. I just want to thank everyone for coming out on a very traditional Welsh summer day. Thank you very much. What I want to tell everyone, and I think you already know it, is that in the next generation or two, billions of people on this planet are going to starve to death. Billions of people on this planet are going to starve to death. Thousands of millions of people are going to die from starvation. And every morning I wake up and I ask myself the question, is this real or isn't it real? Because if it's not real, that's absolutely fine by me. I've got lots of things to do. I want to spend time with my kids. I need to go back to my farm. I want to leave it up to Greenpeace and Friends of the Earth. If millions and billions of people aren't going to be starving, that's fine. But maybe it's true that billions of people are going to starve to death in the next 2 or 3 generations. 3 weeks ago, I talked to Peter Carter, a world-famous scientist, 20 years in the IPCC process, an expert for 3 decades on the climate catastrophe. And he gave me all the science, all the euphemisms we're used to hearing. And I said to him, well, Peter, what you're saying is billions of people are going to starve to death. And there was a pause. And he said, yes. Yes. An expert. Last autumn, I was on Hard Talk. And I said 6 billion people are going to die. The whole of the scientific establishment came down upon me. Extinction Rebellion head office didn't know what to say. It was embarrassing, but it turns out it's correct. Give or take. There's a guy called Kevin Anderson, the professor of climate change at Manchester University. He said a few years ago, we're looking at the end of civilized life, an organized human community. Something along those words. You know the sort of phrases these guys use. What he was really saying is that billions of people are going to starve to death. And you know what? No doubt he might send me an email next week saying, Roger, you got that wrong. It could only be 500 million. That's still 10 World War IIs. And there's the Potsdam Institute, arguably the main institute in the whole of Europe on the climate catastrophe. And the guy who runs it said, we're looking at 1 billion people left. What does that mean? Where have the other 7 billion gone? They've starved to death. But he changed his mind. He sent a private email to Extinction Rebellion. And you know what he said? You say, I think I've got it wrong. It's only half of the world's population. But don't tell anyone. Seriously. The ordinary people of Europe don't need to know that it's only 4 billion. And there's an Australian think tank, very well respected. They said at 4 degrees centigrade, 4 degrees centigrade is what the government has just been asked to adapt to, will involve half the planet being uninhabitable. But don't worry, it's only for 6 months of the year. I thought I'd better put that in as a correction. So let's think for a minute. 4 billion people, where are they going to go for 6 months of the year? An interesting question. If you're a psychopath, so it seems like billions of people are going to be dying of starvation. And the question we're all asking ourselves is, why the fuck is nothing happening? Right? Yeah. Why is nothing happening? Why has nothing happened for 30 fucking years? I did a speech last year in Penzance, and a woman came up to me a while ago. She said, "Great speech, Roger, but I think you are overdoing it a little bit." You know how people do that? When it gets a little bit tricky. And I saw her 2 weeks ago, and she said, "Actually, Roger, I don't think you're overdoing it. Because we've just had COVID, haven't we? We're in the middle of COVID. We've got 50,000 grieving families in this country because of government incompetence." 6 months ago, who would have thought that the whole economy would be closed down in a month because of a little bug? You know what this is called? Nature. Nature will kill us. This is what climate change is. COVID is just the beginning of a descent into hell. 50,000 people have already died. Billions of people are going to starve. It's physics. It's biology. It's life. Get with the program, guys. So why is nothing happening? The reason nothing's happening is because it hasn't all happened yet, right? Which is the most stupid, idiotic idea in the world. If you go to a Swansea mechanic with your car and the mechanic says, if you don't put oil in the car, your engine's going to blow up, and you go down the M4 and you say, well, it hasn't blown up yet. You know what you are? You're a complete idiot. And when you go to the doctor and they say, you've got cancer and you have to do this and you have to do that, otherwise you may die in a year or 2 years or 3 years, and you come home and you say, the stupid doctor, he doesn't know when I'm going to die, so I'm going to ignore it. That's an idiot. And when 11,000 scientists tell the world year after year after year for 30 years that we're all going to die if we carry on putting carbon into the atmosphere, and we carry on, what's that? It's being a complete psychopath. That's what it is. To destroy the next generation, because it hasn't happened yet. I'm going to do a little visual aid for you. I've got a volunteer. Would the volunteer like to come up? Here's the plastic bag. Here's a young person. Here's the plastic bag. Some visual aid. How many minutes before she can't breathe? She's not dead yet though, so it's okay. You know what people are going to say? Great speech, Roger, but the bit with the plastic bag, that was a little bit bad taste. I'll tell you what bad taste is. It's writing those articles that say the next generation is going to starve to death. And that is of concern. Have you read those articles? Nature is being destroyed and it's of concern to us. That's what I call bad taste. And those articles with the quote from Friends of the Earth or Greenpeace at the bottom saying the next generation is going to starve to death, and that shows lack of ambition. Lack of ambition. What the fuck? What are these people on? The biggest crime in the history of humanity. And they're told lack of ambition. And then there's all those science articles, aren't there? The whole fucking thing's fucked. And so, this is what policy makers need to do. We've heard this for 30 years. Policy makers should do X, Y, and Z. That's what I call bad taste. We know what policy makers should do. They should hand themselves in and be put on trial for betraying the next generation, the next 1,000 generations. They will be on trial for treason against the common people, the ordinary people who put their trust in policymakers. Those days are over. And then there's the swearing, isn't there? The fucking swearing. What's that about? A nice lady came up to me a while ago. She said, "Great, Roger, but the swearing's a bit childish. We don't want obscenities." I'll tell you something. When someone comes to my farm and destroys half my crops, you're going to tell me not to fucking swear about it? When someone comes into the city of Swansea and destroys half the economy, closes down the hospitals, destroys the welfare, are you expecting the people of Swansea not to swear? When all the scientists have said the next generation is fucked, what are you expecting the next generation to do? Join Greenpeace? Seriously? So what's going on? Why is nothing happening? I'll tell you why nothing's happening. Because the climate change movement has been dominated for 30 years by the repression and the control and the smothering of the professional classes. There's some very good people I know who are professionals that are in service to the endeavour of this rebellion. But they're exceptions to the rule. What's been happening, and what's been happening for 30 years, is people have been saying, no, 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 Roger. No, no, no. Don't get emotional. Don't swear. Don't do bad taste. Keep it down. Let's be sensible. Let's continue the conversation. Let's talk to the councillors. Let's have a civilised debate. For 30 fucking years, those days are over. That's what I've come to tell you today. Those days are over. The people that have joined XR, that want to turn it into a talk shop, that want to create all these rules. Extinction Rebellion is a rebellion. I give you a few examples. What the professional classes like, what the educated people like, is words. Words, 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 words. Social media and words. Demands, more words. Social justice, racial justice, it's all fucking words. If you're serious about justice, then what's happening with your relationship to the most genocidal government in the history of humanity? Consciously, willingly engaging in the starvation of billions of people in the global south. If you want to be into justice, I suggest you go into rebellion. And what does rebellion look like? It's nothing to do with words. If you go into rebellion, you will be arrested. You will be imprisoned. No, no, no. Let's keep it on the words. The other thing that the professional classes can't handle is death. Death. It's all around us. My father died. I sat by him as he died. My mother died. I sat by her. Death, it happens. Ordinary people can handle it. But professional classes can't handle it. They can't talk about it. They have to take it out. They have to erase it. Anything that's real, rape, sex, shit, death, it's all got to be erased. Because God help us, if we actually were connected with nature, connected with death, maybe we'd actually rebel. When I did the first Heading for Extinction talk, I said that the Nazis invaded Russia. They captured 3 million Russian Soviet troops. They took them to the prisoner of war camps and they starved them to death in 3 months. 3 million people died in 3 months. This is what people are capable of when the shit hits the fan. And 4 years later, the Soviets invaded East Germany. In a matter of months, they'd raped 2 million German women. It only came out 15 years ago. Because the professional classes don't want you to know that when the shit hits the fan, people get raped. People get slaughtered. This is what I mean by emotions, by getting real. This is why we don't have a rebellion. Because we're still floating around. Because what these people do is everything is designed to stop people from acting, to stop action. We've got to have meetings and processes about processes, and processes about processes about processes. We can't leave people out. Everything has to be right. In the meantime, billions of people are going to starve of death. I want to say something about the history of political action in this country, in Wales. Because we're part of a history. We didn't just appear. In 1831, there was an uprising in Merthyr. 10 years later, there was an uprising in Newport. In the late 19th century, there were strikes and more strikes. In 1900, there was a general strike in this country. In 1926, there was a general strike in this country. This country was built by working people. This is why we're standing here today in relative comfort, in relative liberty. Because people sacrificed through collective action, through rebellion, through uprisings, through strikes. And then someone has this idea that you only need to get arrested if you want to. Where did that come from? What tradition did that come from? When those Welsh workers went on strike, it wasn't an option. It was everyone out, because you were part of a community of struggle. That's the tradition we come from. That's the tradition that's been lost. I tell you a story about King's College. When I went to King's College, I had the option to go and pour paint on the central hall. And I could have said to people, you know what? I only want to do it if I want to. And I don't want to because I poured all my own savings into this degree. But I didn't. I decided to do it because it had to be done. Even if they threw me out, I decided to do it. And they did throw me out. Twice. And then I had the option to go on hunger strike. And I could have said, you know what? My accommodation is really insecure, so count me out. But I decided on something more important, which was a college that is investing in the murder of their students. So I went on hunger strike. And you know what happened? I got thrown out of my accommodation. I slept in my car for 3 years. But I didn't get into some self-pity. I didn't think I was some hero. Because billions of people in this world do the same thing every night. So when you go down to London and you got arrested once and you're thinking, I have to get home to my kids, ring them up and say, kids, I'm here to save the next generation from genocide. And once you've been arrested once or twice, and you have to say, I've got to go home because I'll lose my job, ring your boss up and say, I'm here to stop the biggest crime in the history of humanity. And when your partner rings up and says, get over this nonsense, just say, get with the programme and put the phone down. There's something more important, right? When the Welsh miners went down to fight in the Spanish Civil War for the liberty of our parents and our grandparents and us, they didn't say, I'm going to go for a fortnight, but then I better get back because I want an office job. They said, this is the right thing to do and I'll go and do it, whatever the consequences. That's the tradition that we have to start reconnecting with. Otherwise, we're dead. Okay? We're dead. That's what Kevin Anderson says. That's what Peter Carter says. That's what the doctor's saying. It's what the mechanic's saying. It's the real world. So let's forget all this middle class bollocks of I only want to get arrested if I want to. It's not a consumer product. We're not talking about choosing ice creams in Tesco's. We're talking about the future of the whole fucking world. I've been talking to one of the top lawyers in the UK about our political traditions in this country. And I'm sure you can all remember, about 400 years ago, the people in this country cut off the king's head. You remember that one? He didn't have an option, by the way. Do you know why? To establish a sacred principle that no man has the right to pillage, rape and kill his population at will for his own entertainment. No, 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 no. There's a social contract in this country. You know what the social contract says? The government's there to protect us. That's what the government's there to do. That's their side of the contract. And when they willingly, knowingly engage in the starvation to death of the next generation, they have broken that contract. They fucking shattered it. Right? And when they shattered that contract, we have the right to break the government's laws, to bring that government down. And for 300 years, we haven't had a government that intends to destroy the British nation, the British society in a generation. But we've got a government now that intends to do that. So we have to remember that we have a sacred right, and, might I add, an indispensable duty to bring down the government. That's the phrase, a sacred right and an indispensable duty. So when you phone your boss up, when you're down in London in September, tell him, I've got an indispensable duty to be here. And then put the phone down. Because millions of people gave their lives because they had an indispensable duty to keep this society on the go. And this government is in the process of betraying the generations of blood, sweat and toil that were put into creating all we have now. And in the next 20 years, we're going to throw it all away. That's the plan, right? There's all these sophisticated people in London, and they ring me up and they say, Roger, great job, but you've got to give people good news. Otherwise you upset them and they'll go away. I've been upsetting people for 2 years now. That's how Extinction Rebellion was built, on upsetting people. But there's still this idea, in, dare I say it, the North London professional classes who phone me up to give me advice, say, you've got to give people the good news. There's no good news. Okay? There's no good news. That's the truth. It's gone. It's fucked. Sorry. Do you want me to lie? But there's a paradox. And the paradox is the good news is that there isn't good news. We've got nothing to lose. That's the good news. There's nothing to lose because it's all going to go. The good news is we're going to get hurt anyway. That partner's going to leave you anyway. You're going to lose that job anyway. Your kids are going to starve to death anyway. And that's the paradox. Well, rebellion is what people do when they're going to get hurt anyway. That's what gives them the strength to go out. Because they're not bargaining anymore. They're not hoping anymore. And when people go out and rebel with that clarity, that's when the miracle happens. When hope re-emerges. Because then, and only then, will we deserve a little bit of hope. When people go out and rebel, regardless of whether they lose their jobs, regardless of what happens with their kids, regardless of what happens with their families. When they go out and rebel and go on hunger strike, when they get arrested, when they go to prison, only then will there be a little glimmer of hope. I want to finish off by coming back to this question of tradition. So instead of good news, what do we have? We do have a tradition. We have the potential for community. You can't take that from us. We have a history. This country was built on a tradition, on a class of people, on ordinary people. And we know what's happened, don't we? For 30 or 40 years, the ordinary people of this country, the working people of this country, have been told, you don't count. The people with all the money count, but you don't count. You're disposable. You can lose your jobs. You can rot in the housing estates, in the valleys. You're not important anymore. Times have moved on. The professional classes are in control. Well, what do we know? We know the professional classes have completely fucked up. And now what do we know? We know in COVID it was a big lie, because suddenly all those disposable people have suddenly become essential. Have you noticed that? Yeah. The women at the supermarket checkouts, they've suddenly become essential. Surprise, surprise, someone has to do it. The guys that are cleaning the streets are suddenly essential. The lorry drivers are suddenly essential. The farmers, suddenly we become essential. So this is what we need to do, is forget about the professional classes in the universities. They've got the skin in the game. They're not going to be rebels. The people who are going to be rebels are the ordinary people of this city, the ordinary people in the Welsh valleys. We need to get out and talk and speak the truth to these people and say, you have been betrayed. You know you've been betrayed. And the final betrayal is the climate murder project. And it's time to rebel. It's time to reconnect with that tradition from Merthyr and Newport and the general strikes. Because that's the only thing that will save us. We need to say to these guys, step up. We all know the saying, the first will be last, and the last will be first. It's biblical, right? The situation we face is biblical. Let's read a little bit of the Bible for inspiration. What we need to say to these people is step up into your power. Don't let that Roger Hallam make all the fucking speeches. He's rubbish. How do you think these people got the courage? Through oratory, through people standing up and speaking their truth, incoherently but passionately. That's what we need. We need people to do public meetings, to tell people what's going on, to step up. We need people to step up and give their testimonies, like the good old days, before fucking social media. That's what gets people motivated. Emotion, community, solidarity. That's what we need. And Larry Kramer, the great Larry Kramer, the great AIDS activist in New York, you know what he said? He said, you better get powerful, otherwise You're gonna die. You're gonna have to get powerful, people. You're gonna have to step up. You're gonna have to speak your truth. I haven't got a big flowery end for you. When you do your speeches, you can do that. The reason is something we all know, which is words are cheap, right? I can stand here and make as great a speech as you like, but it means fuck all if I'm not doing anything. There's loads of people in this world, they're all on the internet, right? Telling you this and telling you that. But what's going to change this world is action. 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 I'm going to go to London. And I won't be coming back until the government decides to get its shit sorted. Or I'm in prison. One or the other. I'm not coming back unless one of those two things has happened. I'll be going down and throwing paint on the buildings where people are planning the death of my children, the death of my farm, the death of Wales. You might think I'm a little bit het up. No? Actually, I'll confess something. I'm quite enjoying myself recently. Do you know why? Because I'm calm, believe it or not. I'm not desperate anymore. I'm not trying to bargain with people. I'm not trying to get an official position in XR anymore. I'm not trying to impress people. I'm doing what is obvious, which is rebelling. And that gives me a sense of freedom. A sense of freedom from the stress of denial, the stress of lying to myself. We all know what we mean, right? But when you decide to rebel, you are free. That's what I invite you to. And like the great American civil rights slogan, we are free. Free at last. Free at last. I'll see you all in London. Thank you very much.